Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. So welcome to another episode of the Bible Study Sessions. I'm going to continue now with the book of Hebrews, and today I'm going to take a look at chapter 12. Now in case you have missed or you haven't watched the past episodes, I'm going to put them all in the description below, so make sure you check them out. So I will be reading as always from the YouVersion website with the New King James Version translation. This translation is pretty accurate if you compare it to the original Greek text, and has additional references with passages, other verses of the Bible, which again are very useful for studying. And in case there are some quotes from the Old Testament, you already know where they're taken from. So it's very useful to connect and to study the Word of God in that sense. But what I really recommend you is to read the Interlinear Bible. In this one, you have the original Greek text with a word-by-word translation. And this has helped me so much to understand maybe some difficult passages in English as well that you don't really understand what the author's trying to say, or maybe you have questions or you want to dive deeper into the meaning of the word, like the usage, the definition, the lexicon, the context, some additional commentary. It's been very useful. So this is something that I really recommend you to use. And yeah, as always, my goal is to summarize the most important truths and concepts that we can learn in a pretty simple and easy way to follow and to understand. And yeah, I'll show you a way in which you can do exegesis of the text, trying to understand what the text is saying without adding any additional of your own, preconceived interpretations. Yeah, remember that the Bible as a whole is all connected. And yeah, I'm going to be reading the whole chapter and then I'm going to break it down. So Hebrews chapter 12. Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnared us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. You have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin. And you have forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as sons. My son, do not despise the chastening of the Lord, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. For whom the Lord loves, he chastens, and scourges every son whom he receives. If you endure chastening, God deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate, and not sons. Furthermore, we had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be in subjection to the Father of spirits, and live? For they indeed for a few days chasten us as seemed best to them, but he for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. Now no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward he deals the peaceful fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Therefore, strengthen the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, so that with those lame may not be dislocated, but rather be healed. Pursue peace with all people, and holiness, without which no one will see the Lord, looking carefully lest anyone fall short of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled, lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. For you know that afterward, when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears. For you have not come to the mountain that may be touched and burn with fire, and to blackness and darkness and tempest, and to the sound of trumpet and the voice of words, so that those who heard it begged that the word should not be spoken to them any more. For they could not endure what was commanded, and if so much as a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned or shot with an arrow. And so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I am exceedingly afraid and trembling. But you have come to Mount Zion and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels, to a general assembly and church of the firstborn who are registered in heaven, to God the judge of all, and to the spirit of just men made perfect, to Jesus the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaks better things than that of Abel. See that you do not refuse him who speaks, for if they did not escape who refused him who spoke on earth, much more shall we not escape if we turn away from him who speaks from heaven, whose voice then shook the earth. But now he has promised, saying, "Yet once more I shake not only the earth, but also heaven." Now this, yet once more, indicates the removal of those things that are being shaken, as of things that are made, that the things which cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us have grace, by which we may serve God acceptably with reverence and godly fear. For our God is a consuming fire. And that's the end of the chapter. Now, what are the main points, the main truths that we can learn from this chapter? Well, first of all, remember that it starts with therefore. So in the past chapter, Hebrews chapter 11, we have seen so many examples of these characters from the Old Testament that despite their flaws, despite their sins, despite the mistakes that they did, but still they kept believing in God. They obeyed him, they believed in his promises, and they were able to be justified and received the righteousness. And they are witnesses to us about the great things that we can accomplish through faith. And also the things that we might have to suffer because of our faith, because of the fact that we're believing in God and we're following him. And so the authors here start saying, look, because we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, all these characters from the Old Testament, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnared us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. And this is an image that we also have from some letters of Paul, the fact that the Christian life is a race. So once we commit ourselves to the Lord, once we believe in Jesus, and once we repent, and we accept his salvation and forgiveness, we start running this race. And the important thing is having endurance, keep running despite what may happen to us. And the important thing is finishing the race. Remember, keeping the faith until the end, and not starting well and then not being able to progress or turning left or right. So it's very important that we lay aside every weight. So everything from the past, our past failures, our past mistakes, maybe past consequences for our actions or the things that we didn't know the Lord, and the sin that even after we are saved, still sin. Our bodies are physical and they're bounded to sin. And so it's this daily fight against sin, against these desires, the desires of the flesh. And instead we have to put to death our flesh, and instead we have to walk according to the Spirit. And this is something that it's daily, and it's very, very easy that sin deceives us, ensnares us, and make us fall. And no human is perfect, and even Christians are gonna fall. We're gonna sin against God, and that's why we need God's grace. We need God's forgiveness. We ask him to forgive us, and then we keep on running. It's very important that, like, a good Christian is not someone that never sins, because that's impossible. But it's someone that tries its best efforts to obey God, to follow him, to love him. And when he does sin, and it does happen, then he asks for forgiveness, he gets up, and he keeps on running. That's the idea. And always having Jesus in our eyes, looking unto Jesus. He's the author, and actually the word for the Greek is archegon, which actually means the lead founder, I think, the pioneer leader. So the founding leader of our faith. Remember that all our faculties, our reasoning, our logic, that all comes from God. So in a sense, he's the source of our faith, the fact that we have the capacity to choose, and to choose one thing or another, right? To believe or to reject. So in a sense, he's always the author, the source of our faith. But in this case, this word is not looking at that, but it's looking at the fact that Jesus is like the one that has run before us. So we're like following him, right? And then he's also the finisher, which the Greek word, once again, can be looked at perfecter. In this case, the one that brings a process to finish. So yeah, that's the concept, right? So Jesus is both the one that sets the path for us, right? The pioneer leader of our faith, and also the one that brings it to perfection. And we know that the end of our faith is Christ and his salvation. And Jesus himself, you see, for the joy that was set before him, endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And you see, it causes God great joy when a sinner repents and turns from death to life. And even Jesus himself said, there is more joy in heaven, like there is a feast in heaven every time a sinner repents and gets saved. So it brings God joy when people repent and accept his gift and are taken into his family. And because of this joy that Jesus saw, that's why he endured the cross. He despised the shame, the fact that hanging on a tree was actually a curse under the law in the Old Testament. And he has been exalted, he has glorified, and now he has this right hand of the throne of God. And he has the name above all names, and we can be saved through him. And so here it says to us, right? So consider Jesus, who endured such hostility from sinners against himself. So all the sufferings, all these scourgings, all the things that Jesus endured are examples for us, so that we don't become weary and discouraged when we're facing our own troubles and our own sufferings. Remember, the Bible never promises us that we're going to be trouble-free, that our life is going to be perfect, everything is going to be nice, we're going to have everything we're going to want. That's not the biblical message. The message actually of the Bible is that we're going to be persecuted. And if someone really and truly wants to follow Christ, he's going to face persecution in one way, so physical persecution, or another, like maybe a social persecution, or maybe losing, having to sacrifice something for Christ. There is always something that we have to do. We have to take our cross, right, and follow Christ. So when we're facing these troubles, let us be considering that Christ also suffered that, right? And Jesus himself said, look, in the world you're going to have trouble, but take heart. I've overcome the world. So in Jesus, we already have the victory. And sometimes situations in our life don't let us see straight, and we can't see at eternity. We can see at our future glory, our future adoption, the redemption, the fact that we're going to have these perfect bodies, finally free from sin, perfectly well. We're going to have rewards from God for every effort, every sacrifice, everything that we have done for his kingdom is going to be rewarded. We're going to have great treasures in heaven. And that's exactly what we should be looking at, right? Not at this life, but at the next one, right? At the eternity. And that's why we have to keep our eyes fixed, right, on Jesus, and consider what he faced, the hostility that he faced, so that we don't become weary and discouraged while we keep on running. And the others then say here, they use the discipline concept. They are quoting actually here Proverbs chapter 3, verse 11 and 12. And then they're quoting, I think, Psalms 94, verse 12. And it says here that we actually the discipline of the Lord. So in a sense, we can be considering the afflictions and the sufferings and the persecution that we're facing a way in which the Lord is actually disciplining us, is chastening us. So he's making us become more mature, he's making us grow in faith, he's making us depend more on him, he's making us maybe stop doing that thing that is bringing us away from him, or maybe it's sinful, right? But that we are going into the correct path. And God disciplines us in many different ways to allow us to grow, exactly as our earthly father disciplines a child in the same way, right? To make it grow, to become a good adult, a God that has that knows how to interact with others, that knows his own identity, his value, and yeah, the Lord really treats us as sons, and that's why he says here that the Lord loves whom the Lord loves, he chastens, disciplines, right, and scourges every son whom he receives, because of the fact that that makes us understand, okay, this thing that I'm doing is wrong, and so the Lord disciplines us so that we understand, okay, that's wrong, I don't have to do it. So that's in a sense also a way in which we can grow and become more mature, right? And continue our process of sanctification and holiness. And this is exactly what the authors are saying here. Look, even your fathers, right? They corrected you, and we respected them for that. How much more we shall not respect God himself, that is doing us so that we can live. He's doing it for our profit, right? So that we can become partakers of his holiness. And again, no chastening seems joyful for the present, but painful. And we're not sadistic people. We don't enjoy, no Christian enjoys being in sufferings or enjoys facing trials or troubles. But we have to keep on looking at the reward, right, that we're going to have. So yeah, afterward it yields the peaceful fruit of righteousness. So yeah, it's something that trains us, right? The discipline. So facing hard things in life trains us and make us become and grow and mature as persons. And so he says, keep running the race, strengthen your hands, strengthen your knees, make a straight path so that you keep on running, concerning all this that we have seen. Pursue peace with all people, holiness, without which no one will see the Lord. And this is something that we sometimes forget, right? It's very important walking according to the Spirit, doing our best efforts to obey God's commandments, to love Him, to follow Him. And when we do end up sinning, because we're not perfect, ask for forgiveness and keep on going, rather than saying, okay, I'm already saved, God loves me, and yeah, I know I have this sinful lifestyle, but I know that I can always come to God and I can always be forgiven, so I'm going to keep on doing this. That's not walking according to the Spirit, so we have to be careful. And he says here, looking carefully, lest anyone fall short of the grace of God. And once again, these are one of those verses that should make us become a little bit worried, right? Exactly as Hebrews 10:25, and as Hebrews 6 from verse 4 to verse 6, right? It's possible that we can lose God's grace. We can fall short of the grace of God. And now if we fall short of the grace of God, we lose salvation. Like, we are saved by grace through faith in Christ. So there is no way in which if we lose God's grace, then that's it. There is just condemnation outside God's grace. So it's very important that we are careful so that we don't fall short of it. And so again, the holiness part, it's very linked to this one, right? So don't think that we can mock God or we can deceive God, right? Somehow that we can keep on living our sinful lives and just thinking that if we just do a quick prayer, or that God is gonna just love me the same, God is gonna save me the same. Careful. And again, this says, don't have any bitterness, root of bitterness. So shame, guilt, also about your past mistakes. You should let those things go. Remember, forgiveness is a key part of the Christian life. And we have to give forgiveness because it gives us freedom. So when you forgive someone, you're not really doing it for that person, but you're doing it for yourself. You're liberating yourself when you forgive. And also remember, we have to be wise. Like forgiveness, when someone harms you or makes you a wrong, and you say, okay, yeah, I forgive you, and you truly forgive them, that doesn't mean that you trust them, right? So we have to be wise. We don't have to be used or manipulated by people or receive just wrongs after wrongs just because we are Christians, we're supposed to forgive, and therefore people can keep on harming us. So let's be wise and forgive, but then if needed, don't trust. Take your distance, put some boundaries, and yeah, so on. And again, in the others here use actually the example of Esau, and this is such a key thing to examine. There are actually two adjectives here used: is fornicator and profane. And look here what Esau did. For a little bit of food, he sold his birthright. Now remember, the firstborn had actually access to the blessing from the father, the blessing of the firstborn. And it was very, very important. And Esau, when he was hungry, you can read that in Genesis chapter 25 if you want to. Esau was very, very hungry, and his younger brother, Jacob, offered him food in exchange for his birthright. And Esau said, oh, I'm going to die, right? What is this birthright? What is the blessing that I'm going to receive compared to the fact that now I can eat and therefore I can live? So he actually sold his birthright to Jacob. He traded it for a plate of, I think it was, I don't remember, I don't know the name in English, but it was a very common food. And that is being profane and being like a fornicator, being like a sexually immoral person. Why? Because you're not giving the value that you should be giving. You are giving something that has extreme value, like the blessing for being the firstborn. You're exchanging it for a very brief, temporary pleasure for your body. And that's exactly what the sexually immoral does, right? For a brief, momentary pleasure, you may betray your wife, you may betray God in not living your sexuality in the way that God wants you to live it in the context of marriage. You might not even give value to yourself in doing these activities, right? So that's why you are a profane person and fornicator, because you're not giving the value. You're exchanging something of very high value with something that is just food. That's so common, right? So important. Not, let us not be, right? Lest there be any like Esau. And Esau himself, afterward, he wanted to get back his birthright, but it was already too late. And unfortunately, some things that we do, some actions that we do carry consequences that we can't undo. And so that's why it's important that we try not to make mistakes, or especially things that can have grief consequences, right? If they do happen, remember, there's always grace with God. We can always receive forgiveness. But certain things, they cannot be undone. In this case, for example, Esau, the fact when he sold his birthright, he despised so much the blessing that actually he was rejected afterward. And even if he wanted to go back, he couldn't. And the blessing was then given to Jacob, that they became Israel, that from which the nation came. And God renewed the promise with Jacob, not to Esau. So, and actually the descendants of Esau, that was the Edomites, they actually became enemies of Israel. So just imagine how a simple decision, the consequences of that decision. And then here from verse 18 to verse 24, I think, this is a passage that it's not very clear to me as well. The others are comparing an episode that happened in the Old Testament, like in Exodus. You can find the Exodus chapter 19 and 20, when God was about to give the commandments to Moses, and they came to Mount Horeb, and actually there were clouds, there were thunderings, there were fire, there was a lot of things, because God was actually descending on the mountain, right? And God was actually showing to all the Israelites that he was there, and they were afraid. They didn't want Moses to keep on speaking to them. And you can read the whole chapters, 19 and 20, if you want to. And even Moses himself, was afraid of that. And but we're not, it says here, you have not come to this, but now we have come to, it said, Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. So it's a difference. But then he says here that we're coming to like a different context, right? We can get close to the mountain in this case, we can touch it. He says we're coming to this innumerable company of angels. Like he's saying things about the heavenly Jerusalem, right? Things that we're gonna see in the future. The general assembly and church of the firstborn who are registered in heaven, to God the judge of all, spirits of just men made perfect, to Jesus, the mediator of the covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling. But once again, I'm not very sure, or I don't really understand what the authors are trying to convey here in making this comparison. Of course, look here that there is a big difference, right? There is no more fear, right? It's different. Now we can get close, we can reach the heavenly Jerusalem. It's not anymore like a physical place, but it's now the heavenly place. So in a sense, I can understand the difference, but I don't know why there are so many descriptions of so many things that we find there. Now compared that here, there aren't many of these things. Actually, it could be that maybe here, it was fire, it was blackness, it was darkness, it was tempest. These things were the things that you would get in approaching. Instead, now we are coming to a different thing, right? Company of angels, General Assembly of the Church of the Firstborn, to God, to Jesus, to the spirits of men just made perfect. So yeah, but it's, I don't know, it's a little bit obscure. I haven't really understood it properly. And once again, here the author said, see that you don't refuse him who speaks. Exactly as what happened there. Remember, the Israelites were afraid, and therefore they, in a sense, they refused him who spoke. So Moses, they refused him, but they did not escape. Right? They were condemned because of that. Then how much more we shall not escape if we turn away from him who speaks from heaven. And so it's just, again, a comparison, right? Earth first, and the consequence of refusing. So now it speaks from heaven. So there are even more grievous consequences if we don't listen to them and if we turn away. But now he has promised, and this is again a quote from, in this case, is Haggai chapter 2 verse 6. It says, yet once more I shake not only the earth but also heaven. And the authors just do here actually an exegesis of the same text. It says, yet once more indicates the removal of the things that are being shaken. So things that are made, so things that are to be shaken are made, so they are destroyed, so that the things which cannot be shaken may remain. So again, it's comparing physical things to eternal things. And therefore, they say, because we're receiving this kingdom, which cannot be shaken, so it's an everlasting, it's an eternal kingdom, it's a heavenly kingdom. So let us have grace. And so we can serve God acceptably, with reverence, godly fear, not keep on running the race, not indulging in sin, in behaviors like Esau, understand that we can fall short of the grace of God, so we can have to be careful, right? Keep on walking the path of holiness, and remembering that God is a consuming fire. So exactly, I think this is an image that we can apply to ourselves, right? Fire. If you keep it contained, if you keep yourself a distance, if you use it correctly, right, then fire is very, very useful, right? You can cook things, you can warm yourselves, you can burn or destroy things that might be have filth, or things that is garbage. But at the same time, if we get too close to the fire, you can get burned, and fire can burn forests, and fire can really bring destruction as well. So in the same way, we have to remember that God is God, and we are we. So we have to keep this reverence and this godly fear in who God is. He is a consuming fire. So if we get close to God in the correct way through Christ, right, believing in Him, having reference, knowing who He is, then we can get close to Him and be warmed, in a sense, and we can be saved. But if we come to Him with this attitude of rejecting Him, of contempt, of pride, then we can be burned. So that's kind of the idea that I get from these verses. And yeah, that's it, guys. So I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. God bless you, and see ya. Bye bye.